The alien princess walked into my room. Then she saw her portrait on my wall. She was already inside before I could say a word. I had left the front door unlocked because the housing coordinator, a tired man named Glenn, had told me the new exchange guest might arrive while I was in the shower. What he had not told me was that the guest would walk straight past the entry hallway, ignore the guest room on the left, and go directly into my studio like she owned the building. I came out with a towel around my waist, paint still crusted under my fingernails from last night, and I heard the silence before I heard anything else. The specific kind of silence that means someone has stopped moving. Someone has found something. I turned the corner into the studio, and there she was. Her name was Valeith. I would learn that later. Right then, she was just a figure, standing 2 meters tall in front of the north wall of my apartment, her back to me, her long silver fingers hanging at her sides. She was Kethvari. I had seen photographs of her species before. Photographs do not prepare you. Nothing prepares you for the way bioluminescent light runs along a living creature's collarbone and throat like something electric trapped under skin, or the way their eyes catch the room without moving, like they are recording everything all at once. She was staring at the portrait. My portrait, the one I had painted 7 months ago on a rainy Thursday when I had nothing better to do than scroll through the Concordat broadcast archive and ended up watching 20 minutes of the Kethvari diplomatic address to the Galactic Assembly. She had been standing at the speaker's platform, third from the left, and the camera had caught her mid-sentence in a way that made her look like she was trying to say something the translator bead at her throat could not possibly carry. I had paused the feed. I had stared at that face for a long time. Then I had painted it. I was not a famous artist. My name was Owen Calloway, and I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the New Geneva Exchange District because the rent subsidy was good, and I liked the light in the mornings. I had painted Valeith because her face had stopped me cold, and when something stops me cold, I paint it. That is the only reason. I had hung the finished canvas on the north wall because it was the best thing I had done in 3 years, and I was not the kind of man who hides good work in a closet. I had not known she was coming. I had not known her name. I had not known anything about her, except the shape of the thought behind her eyes in a news, still from 7 months ago. She turned around. Her luminescence went white. Pure, flat, total white, flooding the strips along her jaw and neck, and I would learn over the following weeks that white in Kethvari biolanguage means the same thing it means on a computer screen when every process crashes at once. She looked at me. Her eyes were very large and the color of deep water. She said, in standard, her translator bead flickering amber as it worked, "You expected me." "No," I said. "I didn't know you were coming." She looked at the portrait. She looked at me. Her luminescence pulsed once, sharp violet, then settled back to white. "This is my face," she said. "Yes? You painted this before today. 7 months ago." She was quiet for a long time. I became acutely aware that I was still in a towel. I told her I needed 1 minute, went and pulled on jeans and a shirt, came back to find her in exactly the same position, which was somehow more alarming than if she had moved. "Can you explain this?" she said. It was not quite a question. I told her the truth. I told her I had been watching the Concordat broadcast archives, and her face had appeared on my screen, and something about it had made me unable to keep scrolling. I told her I did not know who she was. I told her I had painted her, because that is what I do when something grabs me and will not let go. She said, "What grabbed you?" I said, "You looked like you had something important to say, and you were weighing every single word before you said it. That is the hardest thing in the world to paint. Not a face, the thought behind the face." She was quiet again. Her luminescence was moving now, slow amber rolling up from her collarbone to her jaw and back, and I did not know yet what amber meant. I would learn. Amber, in Kethvari biolanguage, is the color they show when they are encountering something they do not have a word for. She said, "That night, I was arguing with my father about whether I should be allowed to speak. He allowed me 30 seconds. I was calculating what 30 seconds could hold. The room got very still. You painted that," she said. "You painted the inside of a moment you could not have seen." I said, "That is what painting is for." She looked at the portrait for a long time. Then she looked at me like I was something she had not been briefed on, and was not sure how to file. Her name was Valeith, daughter of the High Delegate, and she had been sent to Earth on a cultural observer, posting that the Kethvari Concordat office had described, in its official paperwork, as routine immersion. She was not supposed to be anyone famous. The exchange program deliberately stripped titles. She was just Valeith, junior observer, assigned to apartment 4C in the New Geneva district. My spare room, 83 days. She did not act like someone stripping a title. She acted like someone who had been in charge of rooms her entire life and was simply choosing not to mention it. We had tea that first evening. She could not drink it, but she watched me make it with the focused attention of a scientist, observing a new compound being synthesized. She asked what the steam was for. I said it was not for anything. The water was just hot. She asked why I heated the water past the point required for the tea to steep. I said I did not know. I had never thought about it. She made a small sound that I would later identify as the Kethvari equivalent of finding something endearing and a little sad at the same time. Over the next 2 weeks, she asked me questions constantly. Not diplomatic questions. Not the questions listed in the Concordat Cultural Exchange Handbook that Glenn had given me with a tired look when he dropped off her registration paperwork. She asked real questions. Why do humans paint dead people? Why do humans make art that is ugly on purpose? Why do I paint strangers I will never meet? I answered everything as honestly as I could. I told her we paint dead people because we are angry about death, and painting is one of the things we do with anger we cannot fix. I told her we make ugly art because sometimes pain needs a shape outside ourselves, or it stays inside forever and becomes something worse. I told her I paint strangers because everyone walking down a street is a whole universe, and most universes go unwitnessed, and that seems like a waste. She listened to all of this without interrupting, which was unusual because Glenn had told me Kethvari were known for asking clarifying questions mid-sentence. She did not ask a single clarifying question. She just listened, and when I was finished, she was quiet for a long time, and her amber glow pulsed steady and slow. Then she said, I have visited 6 other species in the past 4 years. None of them do this. I said, paint? She said, insist. On witnessing each other, across time, across death, without agreeing on what they are even looking for. I did not have an answer for that. I just made more tea. By the 3rd week, she was coming into the studio while I worked. She did not ask permission. She simply sat in the wooden chair I kept in the corner and watched. I had expected it to be uncomfortable. It was not. She watched the way you watch something that matters, with her full attention, and without any self-consciousness about it, and after a while, it felt like having a second window in the room, another source of light. She asked once how I knew when a painting was finished. I told her I did not always know. I told her sometimes I thought I was finished, and then I looked at it 3 weeks later and saw everything wrong at once. She asked how I lived with that uncertainty. I said, I just did. She said, among my people, we do not release a memory record until it is verified complete. We would find it agonizing to share something unfinished. I said, among my people, almost everything we share is unfinished. We share it anyway. She was quiet for a moment. Why? I said, because waiting until something is perfect means it never gets shared at all, and that is worse. She looked at the painting I was working on, a street scene from outside my window, 3 figures in rain. She looked at it for a long time, and I watched her luminescence go through amber, and then something else, something low and greenish that I had not seen on her before. I would learn that green means grief, not her own grief, the grief you feel when you understand something for the first time and realize you have been missing it for a long time without knowing. On the 51st day, she asked me to paint her father. She said it plainly, like she was asking me to pass her a glass of water, but her luminescence was flickering, and I had learned by then that flickering meant she was doing something that cost her something. I asked how I was supposed to paint someone I had never seen. She said she would describe him. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she talked for 4 hours. She told me about his height, and the particular way he held his hands when he was thinking, and the color his luminescence went when he was hiding disappointment, which was a very specific dark blue, almost indigo, that she said she had seen exactly 3 times in her life. She told me about the scar on his left shoulder from a political negotiation that had gone badly, in ways that were never discussed openly. She told me the expression he made when he thought no one was watching him, the one that had no name in any language she knew, the one that meant, I am carrying something very heavy, and I have been carrying it for a very long time. I took notes. I drew small reference sketches while she talked. I asked questions the way she had asked me questions over the past weeks. Real questions. Questions that went past the surface. By the end of those 4 hours, I felt like I had sat across from her father at a dinner table. It took me 3 weeks to paint him. She came in twice during those 3 weeks to look at the progress. The first time she said nothing and left. The second time she stood for a long time in front of the unfinished canvas and then said quietly, "His jaw is slightly wrong. When he is thinking, it shifts to the right. Not much. Less than a centimeter." I made the adjustment. She nodded once and left. When the painting was finished, I did not tell her. I waited until she came in on her own, which she did, because by then, she always came into the studio in the evenings. She stopped in the doorway. Her luminescence went white the way it had the very first day, and then it shifted into something I had never seen on her. A deep and spreading gold, slow and warm, moving from her collarbones all the way up to her temples. I did not know what gold meant. I never asked. Some things you leave alone. She said, after a long time, he is going to be very uncomfortable with this. Then she said, he is going to put it in the Hall of the Long Dead. I asked what that was. She told me the Hall of the Long Dead was where the Kethvari kept their memory archives, their most sacred site, the place where nothing material was ever stored, only chemical memory records, only the preserved traces of those who were gone. It had never held a physical object. I did not know what to say. She said, "You have made something that tells the truth about a person. My people preserve truth in chemistry. You preserved it in paint. The method does not change what it is." On the 83rd day, she stood in the entry hallway with a single bag, and the gold was there again in her luminescence, softer this time, like something banked rather than burning. Glenn was downstairs with the transit documentation. We had maybe 4 minutes. I asked if she wanted me to take down her portrait. I had asked this before, on the first night, and she had said, "Tell me what you saw first." She had never actually answered the original question. She looked at the portrait for a long time. Then she said, "Leave it." I said, "Okay." She pressed 2 fingers to the inside of my wrist, the Kethvari greeting that means "I acknowledge you are alive." But she held it longer than a greeting, long enough to feel my pulse twice, maybe 3 times. Her fingers were very cool. She said, "I have reported to the Concordat that humans possess something we have no name for. The act of looking at a thing and caring enough about it to reconstruct it. The refusal to let something simply disappear. My report describes it as a survival behavior. Other delegates found that classification strange." I said, "What do you think?" She said, "I think every species finds a way to hold on to what matters. Your species does it with your hands. I find that remarkable." She picked up her bag and walked out, and I heard her footsteps down the stairwell, measured and even, and then the front door, and then nothing. I stood in the hallway for a while. 6 months later, a package arrived. Kethvari encoded polymer, completely unreadable without the right biology, but there was a paper note folded inside, written in standard, in handwriting I had not known she possessed, small and precise. It said, "The polymer contains a memory record of our 83 days. Every conversation, the smell of your studio, the sound of the rain the night you explained why humans make ugly art. I have placed it in the Hall of the Long Dead beside my father's portrait. You are the first human in the archive. I thought you deserved to know that you will not be forgotten. My people do not say you mattered to me. We say you will not be lost. I hope that carries across the distance." There was no signature. There did not need to be. I read the note twice, then folded it and put it in the drawer of my work table, under the reference sketches I had made, while she described her father. Then I looked at her portrait on the north wall of my studio for a long time. The way she had looked in that broadcast still, mid-sentence, weighing 30 seconds. Then I turned back to my easel, and I started to mix paint. I had work to do. I had always had work to do. That was the thing she had understood before I did. Standing in my studio on the first day, looking at a portrait of herself made by a stranger who had no idea she would ever walk through that door. It was not strange at all. It was the most human thing in the world. We paint what matters. We hang it where we can see it. We refuse to let it go. That is who we are. That is what we do. And somewhere in a hall of chemical memories on a world orbiting a binary star, a record of that fact now lives alongside the greatest dead of an ancient people, because one of them walked into my room and understood. We were worth witnessing. We always were.